one day after the president pledged to lift decades-old sanctions on Syria, and it's despite opposition by Washington ally Israel to that sanctions relief. Trump suggested that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan encouraged him to make the move. We're going to get more analysis on this story now with our international affairs editor, Douglas Herbert. Doug, this then a really big deal, apparently.
Yeah, well, first let's be clear on what we're seeing in those pictures on the screen. This is a meeting of the Gulf Cooperation Council. So you saw Donald Trump there, front and center alongside the host on this first stage of his Mideast tour, Mohammed bin Salman. The Saudi crown prince, the de facto ruler of the Saudi kingdom, and one who yesterday pledged $600 billion dollars of investments in the United States. But the real headline issue, and the reason we're sitting here right now, is this big about-face in U.S. policy. The first face-to-face meeting this morning, just a little while ago, between Donald Trump and the new president of Syria, Mohammed al-Sharaa. And he's been president, obviously, for the past 5-6 months since his rebel movement ousted the former dictator Bashar al-Assad. You have to go back to 2000. Karis, for a U.S. president to have a face-to-face encounter with a Syrian president. That was Bill Clinton, for our pub trivia enthusiasts out there. Bill Clinton in Geneva with Hafez al-Assad, Bashar's father, back in 2000. So it's been a quarter of a century. And what prompted this? What happened here? We had that very dramatic announcement yesterday during an investment forum, shortly after Donald Trump had arrived in the Saudi kingdom, at which he announced. He said, we're lifting the sanctions on Syria. We're going to lift them, and he got a standing ovation for it. Seemed like a bolt out of the blue, out of nowhere. But in fact, Karis, this move, which, like I said, is a big pivot in U.S. foreign policy, lifting what has been crippling sanctions that go back to 1979, really, on Syria, this move prompted by essentially two things. First, the pressure brought to bear by rulers across the Persian Gulf states, the Arab world, who have really wanted, they pressed, they basically pleaded with Donald Trump, lift those sanctions, please. Yes, for the good of the Syrian people, the Syrian economy, so that it could get its footing again. But more importantly, by doing so, preventing perhaps the resurgence of a new conflict, new havoc and chaos in Syria from spilling across the region with obviously ripple effects beyond the region for the rest of the world. So this was sort of a plea that Donald Trump was sort of responding to. But let's also be clear here. What we're seeing in this decision today, in this meeting, this unprecedented meeting this morning between Donald Trump and the new Syrian President Karis, is really exhibit number one, if you will, in what is Trump's transactional approach to foreign policy. Yes, he made this decision to lift the sanctions after speaking to both Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince, and reportedly to the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, both giving him the same message. It's in the best interest for the region, for the world, for you, Mr. President, to lift these sanctions now. But at the end of the day, I use that word transactional, Karis, and the reason for that is, yeah, there's transactional diplomacy here. Donald Trump knows there's quite a bit of deal-making to be done here by lifting these tariffs, which had prohibited the U.S., but also other nations, from doing any business with Syria for over a decade now. So what does he get in return? What's the show me the money part of this lifting the sanctions? Well, he'll get Syrian oil, presumably, access to lots of Syrian oil. He will get lots of access to reconstruction contracts from American firms, namely. Remember, this is a country, Syria, coming out of a brutal, ravaging, devastating 14 years of civil war that have literally brought the country to its knees and left much of its infrastructure in ruins. So there's a lot to rebuild there. And at the end of the day, and maybe, who knows, he actually saw some of the designs or blueprints this morning, the prospect of a Trump Tower, yes, a big, shiny Trump Tower, maybe even 80 stories tall, where? In Syria's capital, Damascus. I wouldn't be shocked if it comes out that Mohammed al-Sharaa, the Syrian president, showed Donald Trump some of the designs for that proposed tower. Doesn't mean it's happening. Doesn't mean it's happened yet. But we do know that when you give Donald Trump the prospect of a good chunk of real estate in a capital like this, he will definitely champ at the bit. So I suspect that there was, yes, one part personal favor, returning the favor for these Arab leaders, pleading with him to lift these sanctions, and one part Donald Trump's own the real estate businessman, the deal maker in him, liking the prospect of having that nice shiny Trump Tower going up in Damascus. But at the end of the day, the fact that the sanctions were lifted themselves, it is a big deal. I mean, he got a standing ovation for it because this had been something a long way in the coming. You could say that the new Syrian president, Karas, had been on the road to legitimacy in recent days and weeks. He had been allowed to travel internationally. He had actually come to France in recent days. He had been to Saudi Arabia, so he's begun meeting with world leaders. The United States also notably back in December had lifted a $10 million bounty on the Syrian president's head, a bounty that had been because he had been designated as a terrorist and technically still is on that list. That bounty was lifted. It had been dropped by the former Biden administration. So he's no longer a wanted $10 million terrorist bounty on his head. He now can travel internationally, and it now seems that he now has perhaps the biggest potential benefactor of Syria unlocking the keys to investment to come, investment that Syria desperately needs, because now that the U.S. has basically given the green light by lifting its own crippling sanctions against Syria, it sends a clear message to the rest of the world. It's okay for you to do so as well. Because let's not forget, these sanctions also prohibited anyone else who wanted to do business with the U.S. from doing business with Syria. So it unlocks a lot of potential there.
Well, Trump's talks in Riyadh also included a strong message for Iran. How much is Tehran's nuclear program looming over this Gulf visit?
Yeah, it's looming. To answer your question briefly, it's a big deal, these Iran talks. There have been 4 rounds so far, the most recent being last Sunday, Karas, on these indirect talks, I have to stress, indirect, between the U.S. and Iran, mediated by another member of this Gulf Cooperation Council that's meeting today, and you see the pictures there. Oman is mediating these talks. And what has been at the crux of the deal? Well, the crux is that Iran has always contended its nuclear program is for civilian purposes only, that its nuclear enrichment is civilian-grade enrichment. They are not building a bomb. They are not building weapons. The U.S. in this talks has gone between conflicting sort of messages, but the most recent being from Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's envoy to Iran, saying basically Iran has to categorically dismantle its nuclear program, which sort of implies dismantling means not just weapons, nuclear enrichment for possible weapons building, but nuclear enrichment for electricity generation, medical purposes, the civilian purposes that Iran says it has absolutely no intention of letting go. It is a matter of its pride, its dignity. It is a right to do so. The latest twist to this story, and that it's looming, is Donald Trump has once again, from this forum just yesterday, Tuesday, warned Iran that it's very much in its interest to make peace now, find peace with that sort of implicit threat that if it doesn't, conflict can flare up pretty quickly again soon. An armed conflict, some sort of military threat could loom. And at the same time, there was a report in the U.S. in the New York Times newspaper saying that, of course, citing anonymous Iranian officials close to these indirect talks, saying that there was a new proposal that had been pitched by Iran to form an international consortium of basically for nuclear enrichment. That is a consortium for civilian-grade nuclear enrichment, and it would be, I'm told we hear Trump speaking right now.